Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says peace in Afghanistan will lead to regional stability. In a video address to the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Qureshi said a political solution to the Afghan conflict is the only way forward. Touching upon other regional issues, Qureshi said human rights violations by Indian troops continue unabated in occupied Kashmir. He added that the Kashmir dispute should be resolved as per UN resolutions and according to the will of Kashmiris. In Afghanistan, the government says the Taliban have killed 28 policemen in a series of attacks on security checkposts in the southern part of the country. Local officials say the Taliban shot dead a number of security personnel even after they surrendered in the southern province of Uruzgan. The group claimed the responsibility for the attacks in several provinces but denied killing unarmed policemen. The latest spike in violence comes as the warring sides are engaged in peace talks in Doha. EU's diplomatic chief Joseph Borrell says Alexander Lukashenko is not the legitimate president of Belarus because he gained power through electoral fraud. In a statement, he said Lukashenko's swearing-in goes against the will of the people and serves only to deepen the political crisis in the country. Earlier, police arrested 364 people during an anti-government protest in Minsk. The coronavirus outbreak continues to overwhelm India as another 1,129 have died in the past 24 hours, while over 86,000 people have tested positive. The country's death toll has crossed 91,000 mark with over 5.7 million infections. In Pakistan, 5 people lost their lives overnight, taking the toll to 6,437. Globally, the virus has claimed over 975,000 lives while infecting more than 31.7 million people. Former Australian cricket legend Dean Jones has died of a heart attack at the age of 59 in India. Born in Melbourne, Jones played 52 tests and 164 one-day matches for Australia. He had been an active cricket analyst and commentated on various leagues around the world. The headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Afghanistan, the government says the Taliban have killed 28 policemen in a series of attacks on security checkposts in the southern part of the country. Local officials say the Taliban shot dead a number of security personnel even after they surrendered in the southern province of Uruzgan. The group claimed the responsibility for the attacks in several provinces but denied killing unarmed policemen. The latest spike in violence comes as the warring sides are engaged in peace talks in Doha aimed at ending the decades-long war. The agreement is expected to pave the way for the withdrawal of all foreign troops from Afghanistan. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says peace in Afghanistan will lead to regional stability. In a video address to the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Qureshi said a political solution to the Afghan conflict is the only way forward. Touching upon other regional issues, Qureshi said human rights violations by Indian troops continue unabated in occupied Kashmir. He added that the Kashmir dispute should be resolved as per UN resolutions and according to the will of Kashmiris. The foreign minister condemns unilateral actions taken to change the demography of disputed areas. He went on to say that Pakistan will continue to play its role for the success of the SAARC forum. The foreign minister said the coronavirus pandemic has affected the global economy. Pakistan has demanded an international probe into extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris by Indian forces. At a VP press briefing in Islamabad, Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said India cannot cover up its heinous war crimes in the occupied valley. He said Pakistan condemns India's continued attempts to illegally alter the demographic structure of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This comes as the Indian troops martyred another civilian during a military operation in the Pulwama district. Indian troops have killed over 300 Kashmiris since New Delhi revoked the special status of Kashmir last year. Russia claims the militants are planning a massive chemical attack in Syria's city of Idlib to accuse the central government. In a statement, the Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria said toxic agents have already been shipped into Idlib. The center said militants are preparing to make staged videos to pin blame on the Syrian government. It said the chemical weapons will be used against the civilian population. Meanwhile, Syria's state media said militants have prepared 2 tons of toxic agents and are keeping it in inhabited locality in the southwest of Idlib. It said that Syria condemns such heinous crimes and calls on the countries supporting terrorists to stop those tricks that target civilians. It added Syria will hold the US, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Turkey responsible for the killing of innocent people without any moral deterrent. Russia has condemned Bulgaria's decision to declare its 2 diplomats persona non grata. In a statement, Russia's foreign ministry said it views Bulgaria's move as an attempt to harm the bilateral cooperation. The ministry said Russia will retaliate against Bulgaria's expulsion of the 2 officials accused of spying. It said their goal was to transfer the official and the state secrets to the Russian military intelligence, but Moscow denies any allegations. EU's diplomatic chief Joseph Borrell says Alexander Lukashenko is not the legitimate president of Belarus because he gained power through electoral fraud. In a statement, he said Lukashenko's swearing-in goes against the will of the people and serves only to deepen the political crisis in the country. He said Brussels is reviewing its ties with Minsk. Earlier, police arrested 364 people during an anti-government protest against Lukashenko's inauguration on Wednesday. The country has been rocked by weeks of protests against alleged rigging in last month's presidential election. But Lukashenko denies any wrongdoing. France says international partners must ramp up pressure on Lebanese political forces to form a government. In a speech, Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said the political forces have still not managed to agree on forming a government. He said strong and convergent pressures are pivotal to push the Lebanese officials to respect their commitments. Le Drian said there will be no international financial aid without the reforms. Meanwhile, the International Support Group for Lebanon also called on the country's leaders to get united and form a government. Iraqi President Barham Saleh has called on the international leaders to unite in the fight against corruption and terrorism. Saleh made the comments in a pre-recorded speech played at the United Nations General Assembly. Saleh said terrorism cannot completely be eradicated if its financing is not dried up. He said among the tasks which the new government must discharge is the holding of early elections next year. Saleh said these elections should be free and transparent within the framework of new electoral law. The Iraqi president also called on the UN to tackle horrific crimes against the Yazidi people.
We must tackle the crimes of genocide and of the massacres of the Yazidi people in Iraq. These acts aimed to exterminate the Yazidi people. For this reason, the international community must stand shoulder to shoulder with Iraq to ensure that such crimes can never be committed again.
Well, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is addressing a high-level panel on financial accountability, transparency and integrity at the moment on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Let's watch live.
$40 billion is in the form of bribes received by these corrupt white-collar criminals. $7 trillion in stolen assets is parked in these safe tax haven destinations. $500 to $600 billion is lost each year in tax avoidance by multinational companies. This bleeding of the poor and developing countries must stop. The international community must adopt decisive actions. And these are the ones I propose. Number one, the stolen assets of developing countries, including proceeds of corruption, bribery, and other crimes, must be returned immediately. Two, the authorities in haven destinations must impose criminal and financial penalties on their financial institutions which receive and utilize such money and assets. Three, the enablers of corruption and bribery, such as accountants, lawyers, and other intermediaries, must be closely regulated, monitored, and held accountable. Four, the beneficial ownership of foreign companies must be revealed immediately upon inquiry by the interested and affected governments. Five, multinational corporations must not be allowed to resort to profit shifting to low tax jurisdictions for avoiding taxation. A global minimum corporate tax could prevent this practice. Six, revenues from digital transactions should be taxed where the revenues are generated, not elsewhere. Seven, unequal investment treaties should be discarded or revised, and a fair system for adjudication of investment disputes set up. Eight, all official and non-official bodies set up to control and monitor illicit financial flows must include all the interested countries. Nine, the UN should set up a mechanism to coordinate and supervise the work of the various official and non-official bodies dealing with illicit financial flows to ensure coherence, consistency, and equity in their work. The need of developing countries to protect and preserve their precious resources has become even more vital because of the recession triggered by COVID-19 pandemic. Excellencies, finally, I would say that unless these steps are taken, the difference between the rich and poor countries will keep growing. The developing countries will get impoverished. And what we see of the current migration crisis, this will be dwarfed by what will happen in the future if this gulf keeps growing.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan was addressing a high-level panel on financial accountability, transparency and integrity on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, which is underway at this moment. And he gave certain points during his address, the foremost of which was the stolen assets of the underdeveloped countries must be returned. He also urged the United Nations to make a mechanism to check the illicit transfer of money, and he also urged the authorities to take a notice of all those enablers who help in the transfer of the illicit money. And we'll include more stories in the bulletin now. Israeli officials have visited Bahrain to discuss areas of cooperation between the two countries. Earlier this month, Bahrain and the UAE signed agreements to establish formal ties with Israel. A Bahraini government spokesperson confirmed the visit of Israeli officials without giving further details. This comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a conversation with Bahrain's Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa. In a tweet, Netanyahu said the two sides discussed the principle of the Abraham Accords in the telephone call. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In the United States, 2 police officers have been shot injured during protests against a grand jury's decision over the killing of Breonna Taylor in Louisville. Earlier, the jury decided 3 officers involved in the killing of the 26-year-old black lady will not be charged for her death.
A state of emergency has been declared in Louisville, and the National Guard have also been deployed to contain the growing number of protesters. Police say both officers who were shot during a clash with demonstrators are stable and have non-life-threatening injuries. On the 13th of March, Breonna Taylor was shot multiple times during a police raid at her apartment. Her death has become a rallying cry for anti-racism protesters who have called for the 3 officers involved to be arrested and charged. But the jury charged only 1 officer with wanton endangerment for firing into a neighbor's apartment in Louisville. The other 2 officers have not been charged.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Cyprus and Greece's maximalist claims are behind tensions in the eastern Mediterranean. Erdogan made the comments during a video conference with head of EU Commission Ursula von der Leyen. He said both Athens and Nicosia are ignoring the rights of Ankara in northern Cyprus. Ankara's Communications Directorate said the 2 officials also discussed Turkish-EU ties and regional developments. Erdogan said Ankara is ready for talks with Athens and expressed hope that Greece will not miss this opportunity for dialogue. Earlier, Erdogan discussed the situation in the disputed waters with NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg. In a tweet, Stoltenberg said the 2 sides discussed ongoing efforts for military deconfliction to avoid incidents. The US says it has imposed sanctions on individuals and entities linked to the leader of Russia's Internet Research Agency. In a statement, the Treasury Department said the IRA conducts operations to exacerbate political tensions and divisions in the foreign countries. It said the department has imposed sanctions against the network of Kremlin-connected Russian businessman Evgeny Prigozhin. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said Prigozhin is the leader of the IRA and has ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Treasury said the blacklisted individuals are working to advance Russia's influence in Central African Republic. The IRA is a St. Petersburg-based company that US intelligence officials say was central to Moscow to sway the 2016 presidential election. The US has announced new sanctions related to Cuba, restricting the import of cigars and liquor from the Caribbean country. Speaking at a White House event, President Donald Trump said the Treasury Department will prohibit US travelers from staying at properties owned by the Cuban government. The president said the decision is part of America's continuing fight against communist oppression. Last year, Washington imposed heavy curbs on travel to Cuba, saying the move aimed to pressure Havana over its support for Venezuela. Since taking office in 2017, Trump has sought to unwind a policy of warming of ties with Cuba pursued by his predecessor, President Barack Obama. Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says Tokyo and Seoul must cooperate to counter any threat from North Korea. Speaking to reporters after a telephone call with South Korea's President Moon Jae-in, Suga said the 2 countries should repair bilateral ties. Moon said South Korea and Japan share same strategic interests and will continue to work for peace in Northeast Asia. Earlier, Seoul accused North Korean military of killing and burning a missing South Korean official. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the man had disappeared from a patrol boat near the border and was later found in North's water. The ministry condemned the killing and urged Pyongyang to punish those involved in the outrageous act. South Korea says North Korean troops have killed and burned one of its fisheries officials. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the man had disappeared from a patrol boat near the border and was later found in the North's waters. It condemned the killing and urged Pyongyang to punish those involved in the outrageous act. Earlier, state news agency reported that the official disappeared from an inspection boat in waters near the island of Yeonpyeong 3 days ago. Pyongyang has not commented on the incident yet. North Korea has tightened its borders to prevent the coronavirus from entering the country. It's a time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The coronavirus outbreak continues to overwhelm India as another 1,129 people have died in the past 24 hours. Well, over 86,000 people have tested positive. Globally, the virus has claimed over 975,000 lives while infecting more than 31.7 million people. More in this report.
As some countries in Asia have succeeded to curb the spread of virus, India struggles with thousands of cases on daily basis. Country's death toll has crossed 91,000 mark with over 5.7 million infections. Mainland China has reported 7 new cases, down from 10 reported a day earlier. Over in Australia's Victoria state, the number of new daily cases was close to a 3-month low. Boeing hopes that restrictions will be eased sooner than expected.
These numbers are coming down. This strategy is working. We are well on track on Sunday to make some further announcements. And I just wanted to make the point that Sunday will not be a day of massive steps. It will not be, the roadmap does not speak to that. It is not a day when we essentially throw the doors open. It will be, however, steady and safe steps, and that sense of gradual, continual progress.
Brazil has world's third highest number of coronavirus cases, leading vaccine makers to seek out South America's largest country to test their candidates. The country's Sao Paulo state authorities say they're likely to start immunizing their population with China's Sinovac vaccine in mid-December. Over in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau warns the country is on the brink of a surge if people did not follow public health guidelines.
In our 4 biggest provinces, the second wave isn't just starting. It's already underway. The numbers are clear. Back on March 13th, when we went into lockdown, there were 47 new cases of COVID-19. Yesterday alone, we had well over 1,000. We're on the brink of a fall that could be much worse than the spring.
In Europe, like other countries where the infection rate has soared, France has been gradually tightening limits on gatherings to avoid a second national lockdown. Unveiling a map of coronavirus danger zones, Paris has given the hardest hit local authorities days to tighten restrictions or risk having a state of health emergency declared there.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 5 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says nearly 800 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said the countrywide death toll stands at 6,437. Said the number of active cases across the country is just over 7,000. The ministry said so far 294,000 people have recovered, while 103 patients are on ventilators. Australian wildlife rescuers have managed to save 90 stranded pilot whales beached alongside the country's west coast island. Officials said 4 of the 90 saved whales were euthanized as they were too exhausted to be rescued. Tasmania's Parks and Wildlife Service Manager Nick Decker said the rescue efforts will continue tomorrow as well. He said the focus will now be shifted to gathering hundreds of dead whales strewn across sandbanks, bays and floating in the water. At least 470 whales were discovered beached on the shore and sandbars along the remote west coast of the island state near the town of Strahan. Over 380 have already died over the past week. Thailand has taken first legal action against Facebook and Twitter for ignoring requests to take down content. The digital ministry said they have filed complaints with the cybercrime police against the social media giants. It said the 2 companies missed a 15-day deadline to comply with the court orders issued a month ago. If the companies fail to respond to the legal action, police could bring a criminal case against them. The ministry said if the companies acknowledge the wrongdoing, the issue can be settled on fines. Stocks in the Asia-Pacific markets have fallen following an overnight drop on Wall Street. South Korean stocks dived as tensions on the Korean peninsula reignited. The Kospi in South Korea dropped more than 2%, but shares of South Korean defense firm Victech soared more than 21%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell close to 2%. Mainland Chinese stocks slipped, with the Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen Component declining over 1.5%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index shed almost 1%. In Australia, ASX 200 declined over 1%. Overall, the MSCI Asia ex Japan Index fell well over 1.5%. Former Australian cricket legend Dean Jones has died of a heart attack at the age of 59 in India. Born in Melbourne, Jones played 52 tests and 164 one-day matches for Australia. He has also been an active cricket analyst and commentated on various leagues around the world. With a 216 as his best score, Jones scored 11 centuries in his test cricket. In ODIs, he scored 7 centuries and 46 50s. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.